Hi everybody, my name is Sierra Watts. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be very serious and something that's a little touchy for me to talk about, but I feel like I'm in a good place to talk about it, and it's going to be a long video. Before you comment or you judge me or anything of the such, I ask that you watch the full video and you watch it with an open mind, because I'm going to be discussing a lot of different things. This video is going to be me comparing my first pregnancy to my second pregnancy, which might confuse you. Some of you might say, I didn't know you had a first pregnancy, because you don't talk about it. And there is a reason I don't talk about it, and I will get into that later. But short story, basically when I was 2 months, I had just turned 15 and I started dating a guy who was 19 years old. The reason I was dating a guy who was 19 years old was because I was in a very bad home situation. My family had just gone through a divorce. My parents were still figuring out who they were, you know, without being in a marriage relationship. I was, you know, going through puberty. I had a lot of questions, and I really wanted attention at that time in my life. I wasn't getting the attention I thought I probably should have been at that age, and there was this guy who was giving me that attention, and at that age, I'm so young, I fell for it. I just wanted to be loved, and this guy provided it for me, and I was stupid at the time, you know, stupid and young, and I fell for it. I grew up in a really small town in Missouri, and the people who came to our school and taught about sexual education was actually from a church, which probably wasn't very good because of a few different things. They didn't really teach us about sex other than STDs and not to have it because God says you're not married, so don't have sex. So really they just sat us in a chair in a room and told us, don't have sex or you're sinning and you're a terrible person and you will go to hell, or, you know, you could get STDs. That's really all they taught us. And they basically taught us, if you end up getting pregnant, you're a terrible person. And yeah, obviously they didn't say it like that, but that's basically what they implied. Our sexual education was so bad that a girl had raised her hand and she asked, can I get that STD if I have sex with another girl? Which is a very valid question, whether or not you believe in gay rights or not. She still deserved an answer. And the teacher's response was, I refuse to answer that question because God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And I remember being taught in class, you know, if you get pregnant, you are going to fail in life. They didn't teach us what happens if you get pregnant. They didn't teach us, you know, effective forms of birth control. They didn't teach us about abortion. They didn't teach us about Plan B. They didn't teach us any of our options. Well, they did tell us about abortion, but they told us if you get an abortion, you're going to hell. So I kind of knew how sex worked, and I kind of didn't. And I know that's really hard for me to explain. I don't really want to go into detail because it's kind of embarrassing that I didn't know everything I should have known at that age. And so I met this guy who told me he couldn't have kids, and he told me he was pulling out, and he wasn't. And at that time, I didn't really know what was going on with my body or what was really going on during sex. I knew I was having sex and I was agreeing to have sex, but I didn't really know what was happening. And like I said, that may be confusing to some of you, like how do you not know? But when you're not taught everything that happens during intercourse, you get confused. And as a young girl, he manipulated me and he ended up getting me pregnant. And that was very hard for someone not only my age, but you didn't get pregnant where I'm from as a teenager. That was just like the worst possible thing that could happen to you. And looking back now, it shouldn't have been made into such a big deal that it was, but back then things were a little different, and it was a really bad situation. I remember when I first found out I was pregnant, I was absolutely destroyed. My parents telling me if I got pregnant they would kick me out, and I know they wouldn't have, like obviously they didn't. I think it was more of a scare tactic, but I remember going and telling my mom, and she didn't know what to do. She wasn't expecting this, and my whole family was just, they were disappointed, they were embarrassed. I was disappointed, I was embarrassed, I was confused, I was lost, it was all these emotions. And if that would have happened today, I don't think it would be like that, just because like the whole situation really matured all of us, myself, my family, everybody. They definitely wouldn't react the same way today, but back then we didn't, you know, expect this to happen, and it did. So in the beginning I kind of wanted an abortion, but the way I was raised, abortion is awful. It's something you don't do, and you go to hell if you have an abortion. Now, I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong, because I know a lot of you guys have your own, you know, views on abortion. I will say I'm pro-choice, but back then I was pro-life because that's how I was taught. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that's not what I'm here to say. The point is I didn't know my options. And, you know, I remember my parents asking me, do you want to get an abortion? And I don't think they wanted me to, just because that's how they were raised as well. But they did ask me that question. And I remember saying, no, I don't want to do that, just because that was not something we did where I come from. So then there was this question of, do I have an adoption or do I keep the child? My parents being raised, you didn't have an adoption. If you got pregnant, you took care of your, you know, consequences and you raised the child. So I wanted an adoption, but I knew that that wasn't a possibility, or at least as far as I knew. And you know, my family didn't agree with me getting an adoption, and I don't blame them, because that's how they were raised, and at that time they viewed it as wrong. They also didn't know the whole situation with the guy who took advantage of me, because I was too embarrassed to tell them. In fact, it took me years after that situation to come to terms with the fact that I got taken advantage of. I didn't tell anybody that I did, because I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, and I'm at this point in my life now where I tell myself, you know, I was young, I was manipulated, and I was lied to, and I wasn't taught the education that I should have been taught. And now that I'm older, I realize I have no reason to really be embarrassed of that. But it took me a long time to get to that point and to admit it. So I was in this situation, and on the inside I wanted to get an adoption, but when I told my family, they were completely against it. You know, they said they would take me to court, they would say all this stuff, and like I said, please do not judge them for that. They were just doing what they thought was right at the time. I don't want anybody to bash them or anything such as that, because now, you know, after the adoption, they were very supportive and stuff like that, and they were just doing what they thought was right. And there is no reason to hate on them or, you know, comment saying they're so wrong, whatever. I want you guys to be polite. Everybody in the situation was confused, and no one really knew what to do. It was all new to everybody. Anyways, so I had forced myself to think, okay, I'm having a baby, I'm going to raise him, it's going to be fine. And the whole pregnancy was awful. I was depressed, I was suicidal, which is messed up because I was pregnant. I was in a very, very dark place. My parents were in a very dark place. My family was in a very dark place because it was hard for all of us. My town wasn't necessarily welcoming about it. There were a lot of people who supported me, and the reason they did was because I made a video talking about it and whatnot, but it was very hard. I got called a slut, I got called terrible names, terrible names. I had girls in my grade saying I should kill myself. It was very ugly and very bad. Now, towards the end of my pregnancy, my mom came to me and she sat me down and she said, I know it's been a long time and we probably shouldn't have waited this long, but if you want to have an adoption, you can have one. And as much as I'm so glad my mom came to me and told me that, because I wouldn't have done it if she never would have came to me, it was very hard because it was 3 weeks before I would have gone into labor. So this whole time during my pregnancy, I had forced myself to think I can raise a child, even though I was depressed, even though I was suicidal, even though I was confused. I had forced myself to think I can do it. And then, you know, 3 weeks before labor, I can change my mind. And I did, because I was 15. I couldn't raise a baby. Not saying that other 15-year-olds can't, because I know a lot of teen moms who can, but for someone with terrible mental health, I don't think it would have been healthy. And that's what I did. I decided to have an adoption, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. The reason I don't talk about that today is because the family doesn't want me to discuss him now. However, the reason I am telling this today is because when I was pregnant, he was mine, so it's still my experience to tell. However, when you guys ask about that situation, the family and me does not want to discuss it online, and I have to respect that. So there's a reason why I don't talk about it today. It's not because I don't want to, it's not because I'm ashamed, it's not because I just don't want to answer the questions. It's because me and the family of the adoption has decided to keep it private. Now, the pregnancy is still an experience I want to discuss because, you know, that's a thing. However, when you guys ask about that situation, I will not answer at all. That's just to sum it up. When I had gone into labor, I was on an epidural, and I was also on some kind of other medicine, and I was high off my mind. I was super high, and I did not like it, but I was kind of glad I was on all the medicine because I don't know if I could have dealt with all of it being sober, and it was hard, as any adoption would be. After the adoption, I was still, you know, suicidal, I was still depressed and whatnot, but I was happy that I had a chance to have a normal life. So time goes on, and because of what I went through, it was very hard for me to look at babies. I had very bad closure with the situation. I couldn't really look at a baby without feeling sad. I couldn't connect with children. It was just not good. And then my friend Aurelie got pregnant as a teenager, and that was very hard for me because I had to watch her kind of go through what I did, but in a better light in some ways. And as I got older, I started working at a facility that takes care of kids, and I was placed in the baby room. And I'm so glad that I was, because at first I was really nervous about it because I had no connection with babies, because my last connection with a baby was traumatizing. It hurt me. So I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to care for the babies as fully as I could because I lacked that connection. However, I'm so glad I was put in there because it helped with my closure. I gained connection to babies again. I was able to, you know, figure out what was going on in my mind and my body and, you know, my spirituality when it came to, you know, babies and kids. So time goes by, and I find out I'm pregnant, and I'm ecstatic because this is a chance for me to have an experience I didn't get to have before. And my family was absolutely happy. My family did such a good job with this pregnancy, and I feel like the reason they did that was not only because they were excited for me, but because they knew I deserved a good pregnancy. And I remember when I found out I was pregnant this pregnancy, Drake told me, he said, I want this experience to be absolutely amazing because you didn't get that the first time. And so my mom, my cousins, my family, everybody, I feel like made that such a good experience for me, and I'm so happy they did because I do think I deserve that after everything I have went through. And so it's really hard for me to sit here and compare the two because they're on complete different sides of the spectrum. One was absolutely awful and one was absolutely amazing. Now, the awful one did turn into something beautiful, and I'm glad it did because it deserved to. And now I'm here with my baby who is sitting over here in the bouncer, and I couldn't be more happier. Now, the reason I decided to go natural with this labor was because the first one was so bad and so extreme. I wanted to try the absolute opposite, and I'm glad I did because it was such a spiritual and awakening experience for myself. And as weird as it may be, having a child now has brought me so much closure with my first pregnancy, and it's only helped me grow as a human being. And I also think going through what I did in my first pregnancy prepared me better during the second pregnancy because I knew what kind of mom I wanted to be. I knew how I wanted this pregnancy to go. I had these expectations, and for the most part they came true. With that being said, I believe everything in my life happened for a reason. I believe I went through what I went through so I could be a better mom today, so I could be a better person today. And as bad as it was, it turned into such a beautiful thing, because I was able to give a family who couldn't have children a baby, and I was able to work on my mental health and grow as a human being before I actually became a mother. All the abortion laws going around and just everything like that, whether or not you are pro-life or pro-choice, I want women out there to know that whatever choice you make is yours, not anybody else's. Because I remember during my pregnancy, everyone told me what I should do. And that was hard because I was young and I was easily influenced, and I didn't know what to do because I had my family telling me one thing, I had myself telling me one thing, I had the internet, and then I had my friends. And I want to say, if you are pregnant and you don't know what to do, trust your instincts. Don't listen to anybody else. Trust your heart, trust your gut feeling, and do that, because you will regret it if you don't. Hey, it's okay, Bubba. Hey, it's okay, mommy's here. I know, it's tough being a baby. Another thing I want to say is, if you are a parent, make sure to educate your child on sex. I know you may think it may be harmful to teach them because then they might go out and have it, but that's not the point. The point is, if I would have known just a little bit more, I could have kept myself from being put in a bad situation. Also, I want to say, if you are a teen mom out there, whether or not whatever your choice was, you are awesome, and I'm sorry the world can be so against you sometimes. Hey baby, it's okay. Anyways, that is basically summing up this video. Make sure you subscribe and turn on the post notifications by turning on the bell. And I hope this video gave you a little bit of insight about my life, or, you know, answered any questions that any of you young ladies or men might have. With that being said, I'm going to log off, and I will see you guys later with a new video. Bye.